Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering, live from Autodesk Accelerate 2019. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, we're joined now by Richard Hatfield, founder and CEO of Lightning Motorcycles. Richard, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is one that I'm really excited about doing, but before we get into what you do, what Lightning Motorcycles is all about, how it all came to be, we like to play a little game with everyone to understand if you're more like a James or more like a Luke. So we're going to ask you a few questions. Just give us a quick answer, and we'll be able to determine exactly what kind of personality you are.
So no wrong answers.
No wrong. Well,
Unless it's James. Unless you lean more towards James's side. So first question, 3D printing or CNC machining?
Both. I'm sorry on that one. There's a place for both. So we 3D print things before we do CNC.
okay, how about a CAD tool? Inventor or Fusion 360?
Currently, we're more Inventor.
Okay.
Okay.
One for Luke?
Yeah, one for
I'm
Luke.
winning so far.
One for the bad guys.
I heard you talk about this in your presentation, so I'm hoping you're going to say the
Yeah.
answer. What simulation tool, FEA or CFD, if you had to choose one?
We would do more FEA than CFD.
really?
Yes, I thought I was going to lose
I thought
that
all
one.
the CFD talk you were
I know.
talking about aerodynamics, I would have assumed it would have went the other way.
It's important too. We do a lot of aerodynamics. We do a lot of CFD. We've got our own scale wind tunnel, and then we have a full scale wind tunnel about 10 miles from our facility. So.
Okay. Energy of the future, solar or wind?
So that's a both question again.
It's the last person we interviewed said, it depends where you live. So
That's true.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that in the future, energy is going to come from a variety of sources. It's not going to be single source. So,
okay.
All right, so how about this? Generative design, which you know all about. Where's it going to have a bigger impact? The aerospace industry or the automotive industry?
Or an industry you might mention that isn't either one of those two.
I think it's going to have a big impact everywhere. I think it's going to go very mainstream, and we're going to see generative design everywhere.
Okay.
You're very non-committal to us. Okay, one more, and this one's
The most important
going
question
to really
that
place
seals
you.
the deal.
Are you a chicken wings guy or a taco guy?
Taco.
See, I always win in the end because everybody loves
tacos. All right.
So don't tell any of the other speakers, but you're definitely one of the coolest people we've interviewed. Anybody that owns a motorcycle company is pretty good in my book. So first of all, I just wanted to get that out there. I do have to ask, Lightning Motorcycles, give like the elevator pitch of why, how you started, what was the reason for electric motorcycles versus just a traditional motorcycle. I heard some of it in your presentation, but for our listeners that didn't get to check it out.
Yeah, the beginning of Lightning Motorcycles was really getting drafted into being the driver of an electric race car team. Oh. And when I experienced what electric drive felt like, the seamless, instant torque, the fact that you have one moving part versus hundreds of moving parts, it just seemed like the future. And when we built the first bike and I rode it up the first hill and felt that acceleration and this hand of God thrusting me up the road with no noise, no vibration, it had to be a product. It's one of those things that was just irresistible, and I had to do.
And how long ago what year was that ride up the hill? I didn't catch the very beginning of your presentation. I came a couple minutes in.
It's been an overnight success. We did it 13 years ago.
Okay. And in 13 years, how much of that time has been, I'll say, and it might still be the pains of growing and the pains of building a new company, but how much of that is building production bikes that people can buy of those 13 years?
We started delivering bikes the end of 2015.
Okay.
So the majority of it was developing the technology, refining the technology, competing, developing the brand, and starting the whole process of series production.
Okay.
So I'm not a motorcycle guy because I get scared. Well, I'll put it out there. That's okay. But I have some friends that are big into bikes. They they're always working on theirs. Theirs are always breaking. But I was texting one of my friends during your presentation, like, have you checked these guys out? Like, and, of course he got the, electric, and I'm like, have you seen how fast these go? Now, was it your first motorcycle that Lightning Motorcycles designed that now holds the record for speed?
That was actually the fourth. So
that was the fourth? Okay.
The second bike we built broke a speed record that had stood for 35 years.
Oh, okay.
That was one that the CTO of Tesla provided the motor system out of a crushed EV1 to us. We built that bike. And then the next year we went back with the fourth bike and did the 218 mile an hour run.
That's crazy.
218.
And you named the model, the 218, right? Was that the model name?
It is, yeah. So it was actually a convention that Jaguar started. So they had the XK120, the XK150, and later a 220.
I never realized that's why they were naming that's the speed it could accomplish.
The speed that it accomplished. Yeah.
I never...
Learn something new, Luke. Learn something new.
So James, you're driving a Chevy 62? Is that what you're driving? A Chevy 60?
A Chevy 62. That's what my truck hits is 62. Yeah, basically.
Back to being afraid on a motorcycle. I mean, that's it's wise to be afraid on a motorcycle.
Right.
So, if you get on a motorcycle, you need to have a very high level of situational awareness. If somebody runs into you in a car, it's a bad day. If somebody runs into you on a motorcycle, it's more.
Yeah.
So I actually had a customer who said, I don't think I'm afraid of my 218 anymore. And I said, you should sell it.
Yeah, you should be, right?
Yeah.
You're in a bad way once that happens, right? Wow.
So was the record that you achieved, the 218, was that just a product of the development of the bike, or was that the goal, is to build the bike to do that? Which came first?
The goal was and we set this very early on, the goal was to build electric motorcycles that outperformed gas motorcycles and provided a better rider experience. So, and again, like I said in the presentation, when we set that as a goal, it was not well received. It was it seemed like a really impossible dream. And now looking back 13 years, everyone says, well, of course, instant torque, of course electric motorcycles and electric cars are fast.
So I understand that, I think everybody's aware of Tesla and electric cars and the challenge that electric cars have had with, traditional automotive manufacturers kind of suppressing that and almost making it difficult, the environment to compete in. Did you find that, Honda, Yamaha, all these you talked about them on stage, the traditional, motorcycle manufacturers, were they receptive? Were they working on their own electric bikes and didn't see you as competition? Is it a totally different market? How's that been seen?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I think most of the legacy gas motorcycle companies now have electric projects. The founder's son of Honda has been racing electric motorcycles at the Isle of Man now for the last 6 or 7 years.
That's that crazy, super fast, road race. Is that right?
Yeah, no, it's really fast. So you're riding through city streets on 200-300-year-old cobblestone streets with stone walls on the side and going 200 miles an hour into residential areas. So yeah, it's a pretty it's a risky event.
Yeah, the videos are amazing. I've seen so.
But yeah, everyone's working on it. I think it's very much like the automobile business in that everybody said, yeah, let Tesla build these cars. No one's ever going to take these serious. They're not going to amount to anything. And then once Tesla started getting momentum, all the legacy companies jumped in to catch up. And I think it's similar right now. All the legacy companies see the writing on the wall and see that this is going to happen. And just kind of an interesting point, a couple years ago when we were at Bonneville, an individual walked up and started asking our engineers a bunch of questions about our bike. And I was talking to the rider who was getting ready to do a run, and they were really technical questions that people typically don't ask. You typically get the how fast, how much, how far kind of questions, right? And these were pretty deep questions. And I went over and I said, "You seem to know a lot about, electric motorcycles." And he said, "Yeah, well, I've built 2 myself." I said, "Well, tell me about your 2."
Yeah.
And he started describing them. And I said, "Well, those sound an awful lot like the Honda Mugen Islandman race bikes." And he said, "Oh, so you've heard about my bikes?" And I said, yeah, I've heard about your bikes. So what's your involvement in these?" He goes, "Well, technically I own them." I said, "Well, if you own them, then you're Mr. Honda." And he said, "Yeah, I'm Mr. Honda." And he spent the next 2 days with us. So
That
it's
is
kind of
exceptionally cool.
Yeah.
it's surprising of when you're trying to do something new and different, what kind of ripples go out across the pond.
That's a great story.
Oh, that really is.
So,
And interestingly enough, we were being filmed for a History Channel show, and they caught the whole thing on camera, so it's part of that show.
That's great.
So when you think about your product development process, give us a snapshot. I saw it on stage again for our listeners. Describe what that looks like. Kind of from that concept to, I think you called it test drive was the process, and all those things that fall in the middle, and all the different tools you may be using along that way, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So there's 2 kind of initial steps: deciding what kind of product segment we're targeting, and then looking at what technology we can put together to address that. And then once we refine that and decide what direction we're going to go and what we're going to use to get there, then we start doing FEA and building the chassis out and looking at what can we use that we've already developed, what we have to develop new, and then we start working on the aesthetics part and the rider ergonomics part. And so that's typically a lot of rendering and sketching and going out to our customers and prospective customers and getting their feedback on what direction they think that we should go. And then we'll go to clay modeling. We'll make the initial bucks off of the clay model, make hard parts, and then scan those, take those in, and then go forward with manufacturing.
One of the things that really stuck with me during your presentation today was actually from one of the questions that was in the audience. And to summarize it, it basically went something like this. "I'm old and I don't want to crouch down. Are you planning on having anything for me to sit up straighter while I'm riding?" And you went on to say just how much that impacts how many miles you can get on the bike. What are you thinking to try and address that? Is it a technology thing and the batteries just have to get better? How is that going to happen?
Yeah, I think there's a multiple kind of ways of addressing it. So the number one is as batteries get better and better, that becomes less of an issue. And as I addressed as well, there are batteries out there now that are orders of magnitude better. They're just not ready for prime time yet. And that's going to make, when you have the Mr. Fusion size battery that goes in the bike, then range is not an issue anymore. And that's, not that far away from what I can tell.
Not that far away, you think like
they're in the laboratory right now working, but the process, batteries are, in being around a lot of early stage battery companies, you first have to get the chemistry stable. You have to be able to scale it, get it reproducible. And then you have temperature. It has to be able to work in a variety of temperatures. You have to have cycle life. You have to have power density. And then it has to be, you have to be able to then have the resources to back it. So, I would have thought, 2 years ago that this was 3 or 4 years away, but it still looks like it's 2 to 3 years away. But there are always challenges to address.
So I was going to ask the question during the session, but I'll ask you now. Is I've heard from Tesla owners. Teslas are the maintenance. When something goes wrong, it's a challenge because there's only certain places that work on them. How do you address that as one of the very few electric motorcycle manufacturers where, it is a specialized mechanic that needs to more than likely work on that bike. Is this an education thing that happens with, the shops? Is this something where there's a network, the way Tesla has handled it, and they have like a network of shops that deal with that? So how do you address, the maintenance that is ongoing with, any motorcycle or car?
Yeah, in general, the electric drives and batteries and electronics, power electronics, require a lot less maintenance. So the first bike that we took to Bonneville in 2011 that set the record, we've raced that since. We've put lots of cycles on it, and we've never opened it up. It's same battery pack, same motors, same electronics. We've replaced a lot of tires. We've replaced a lot of chains. But those are things that any motorcycle shop can do.
Okay.
So, in some ways, it's like, the tall building with the elevator motor in the basement that's been down there for 35 years and has half an inch of dust and grease on it, and it just makes the elevator goes up and down. You don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
But I think, as, Tesla's really tried to push the technology envelope, and they've pushed the supply chain. So I think it's less the main components that require the maintenance than it is some of the other technology that's involved. But our tactic is we're really going to, particularly in the U.S., we're going to go through traditional motorcycle distributors. We're going to target the tier 1 motorcycle distributors who have multi shop franchises and focus on giving really good support to fewer dealerships and training than some of the other companies who've elected to try to get as many dealerships as they can. And, if you've got 200 or 300 dealerships you're supporting and you're supporting a new product, that requires a lot of resources to do. So we're going to look more at regional tier 1 dealerships.
So you would think whenever I go out and I buy my Strike next year and I can take it to a shop in Pittsburgh, let's say, and they can put a tire on for me or change a chain for me. It's nothing specialized, like you said.
That's correct, yeah. So all of that's very straightforward. Bolting body panels on or off, that's very straightforward. And then, if it's power electronics, replace with known good items, see if that corrects the problem.
Gotcha.
So there's ways of diagnostics over the computer system. And, we have to have regional support that are well-trained and have resources to back them.
Something else that we started discussing after your presentation was the sound of the bike. And I'm guessing people like how noisy their motorcycles are. Like it's something to be proud about.
Like
or
Harley
something
guys
like
seem to
Harley
be
guys want that
the louder
noise.
the better kind of thing.
So a couple things on that. Right.
Did you see the South Park episode about that?
No.
Yeah. I have. So do you think... Do you have a problem where people are like, it doesn't have that sound and they don't like it? And then also, someone else brought this up. Is there like a safety concern because they're so quiet that people don't hear them coming? And like we were saying, both like children in the area or animals might not even hear you coming.
Yeah, we've never had a complaint from someone who's ridden one of our bikes. Because you saw in the video, the experience of riding the bike, is an experience in itself.
I was uncomfortable just watching it, but then again, I'm not very brave.
So, we do hear that from people that haven't been on the bike. A lot of experienced journalists that ride the bike, they'll say it sounds like a scream. I mean, when you're on it and really accelerating, it's a different sound. Regarding the safety, there was a motorcycle study done about crashing and all of that. And their statement was that you really only hear motorcycles in traffic when they're 1 to 1.5 car lengths behind you. Oh. And at that point, it's if they have any kind of closing speed, there's not a lot you're going to do about it.
Right.
So, it's just if you get on a motorcycle, you have to have situational awareness. You have to be responsible for your own safety. It's critical.
So The one thing that a lot of the presenters have talked about is generative design, and I'm wondering what's your experience been with it. We've seen a lot of the swing arm, I think, has been used generatively, or the generative design studies have been done on that, and I'm wondering how's something like that impacted your product development process, and how do you see those impacts affecting production vehicles?
So the response from the market in general has been really supportive. It's about 70% of the people say that's really exciting. You know, it's different, it's new, it looks light, it looks strong. And then the other 30% kind of break down right now of, well, if you crash, you know, are all of those small pieces going to break, and what happens when you crash, or, you know, that looks very different and I'm not used to things that are different. You know, we thought that, you know, one way, again, using competition to really define this, right? If a MotoGP racer, who's typically a third or fourth place finisher, shows up with a bike that has components that have generative design and look different, and then wins the race very quickly, that kind of design is going to become associated with, you know, being faster and being lighter. And, you know, I think it's something that could really be useful. But, you know, if you can get something that has the same strength and it's 30, 35, 40% lighter, I mean, that's a game changer.
Yeah, and I imagine too, you're in this industry where, you know, winning is what sells. I mean, I imagine that, you know, the 218, like, that alone, like, drives the fact that this technology is that electric motorcycles are viable, that all the different technologies that you're plugging into it make sense. I'm wondering, do you think that success is something that can carry, you know, electric motorcycles into the future? You know, right now, there's a handful of electric motorcycle companies out there that I've seen. None of them as impressive as the video that I saw on the speeds that you see, or even the range. Is that something you see is going to make this more mainstream, where the majority of motorcycles in 5 years or 10 years are going to be electric?
You know, I think it is it's a type of product that gets measured objectively rather than subjectively, right? If you have a cruiser and you're going to compete against Harley Davidson, you know, how do you measure whether it's a better cruiser than a Harley Davidson? Where sport bikes, like, you know, like performance cars, they're measured objectively. Does it go faster? Does it go around this track quicker? Does it win races, right? So there's the old saying of, you know, win on Sunday, sell on Monday, right? And in these kind of performance applications where, you know, they're objectively quantified, it helps. And then, you know, does a Corvette winning Le Mans or winning Daytona, does that help sell, you know, Impalas? You know, to a certain degree, right? Does the NASCAR help sell, you know, other cars? So, you know, ultimately in some of the other areas, the adventure bikes and all of that, the cruisers, I think it will have an impact. A premium brand will carry over, but we purposefully targeted, you know, this type of application for a few reasons: the aerodynamics, the fact that, you know, we like competition, and it's a really great way to get the brand out and challenge ourselves to be the best, and it's a way of being measured objectively. You know, how if we race against this particular brand and we win, then we've achieved something.
I'd love to keep going with this because it's been really interesting, but unfortunately we have to wrap things up now. But I did want to take a moment to thank you for joining us here at Accelerate, sitting down with us and going through this. Like Luke said, I think this was probably the coolest interview that we've gotten to do.
Yeah, and we just got to figure out some kind of employee discount or something like that. I'm not sure.
I figure we're going to have an unprofessional engineering bike that we just have done. It's going to look good.
There should be one, I think.
I think so
we'll
as
have to
well.
work on that.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us, and until next time.
See ya.